Mace would pop up. Foxy Brown came through. Like this is all in the dirty apartment. We're just all in there. Just like half of the kids is hustling, half of the kids are in music. You know, we were just young and just trying to find life and trying to really get out of this shit.
Boom, boom, boom. 1, 2, 3. We are recording. What up, everybody? Welcome to the Prove to Me that You're Alive LiteCast. Now, I don't want to do the intro today because I want to spend the time on introducing this very special today's guest, man. And Geno, like, excuse me, but you know, this intro has to happen because I need for you and for people to understand what this means to me and to the hip-hop world, man, if you will. So when I was a young teenager coming from the third world, fresh off the boat from Ukraine, man, growing up in New York, you know, I was immersing myself in hip-hop. I became a hip-hop artist. And some of my heroes were, you know, like Nas. I was a crazy Wu-Tang fanatic, man. I was a Locks fanatic, man. And then comes this guy, man. This guy. We hear Genovese Thesis, bro. And you know, when Eminem first came out, like, we knew, you know, it's a white guy, like, he raps it, like, we loved it, you know, like, that's what he does. When we first heard the Genovese Thesis, we didn't hear white, we didn't hear black. We heard hip hop at its core, and we heard New York, man. And it was such a big impact on my life, man. You know, for people to understand, to us street kids, you know, Genovese, you and a lot of these rappers, they were more than just heroes. You guys were like fathers to us. To a lot of the fatherless kids on the streets, you were like dads to us, man. Older brothers and fathers, you know. So then, like, a couple weeks later, me and my boy, we shot a podcast. We're sitting in a car and I played one of my new tracks, and he's like, yo, you know who you remind me of? I don't know if you remember him, but you know who you remind me of? And I'm like, who? He's like, Genovese. I'm like, bro, I'm like, do I remember? So we put on the Thesis, and guess what? Goosebumps, man. The same feeling that I had when I was a kid. And I'm like, yo, I go home, I'm like, I gotta hit him up. But again, I did celebrity jewelry. I met everybody, and 99.9% of the dudes that I used to take as my heroes just ended up being whack, man. So I'm like, I pray that my hero, man, is not whack, man. Because just the last thing, so you understand, like, just like Catholic kids would go to Sunday school and study the 10 Commandments, that's the way we studied the Thesis. You know what I'm saying? This was our Bible, man. Like, just for you, I'm not even, like, you know, exaggerating, man. To us as hip hop kids in the late 90s, like early 2000s, this was it. So my hero ended up being a cool, humble dude, agreed to do this, man. And without further ado, I want to introduce to all of y'all somebody that has cemented himself as a hip hop classic forever, man. And obviously the catalog is much bigger than just the Thesis, because there's my life. And I always say, how do you know the difference between a good artist and a great artist? A great artist can be honest in his tracks, and this special human being that I'm about to introduce was always honest. He was never afraid to be vulnerable. He was never afraid to talk about his life story. And I just thought to myself, like, yo, we need to document this. We need to show love to. Without further ado, man, I bring to you one of my greats, one of hip hop's greats of all time, a legend, a myth, man, a human being, a wonderful father, because I went through your Instagram, man. And I bring to you Genovese himself, man. Genovese, man.
Yo, brother, listen, that's a hell of an intro. You know what I mean? Like that, I feel it here. You know, and that's what this is all about, right? Like, you know, money. It's all. But when people feel, listen, music is timeless. Let's all know. It doesn't matter when, what. I sit and listen to Frank Sinatra and I can hear songs that I never heard before. And I'm like, it's like a new artist, right? It's the same way. It just, but you have to put the work in to be timeless, right? You have to, you know, your work had to leap generations, right? It had to go from, like you said, I have kids that hit me up that at 20 something, they were like, yo, my father or my uncle used to listen to your shit. And that's like, damn, when you go to the well, let's be honest, where I'm from, everybody had bars, right? And that's the reason why the Locks are still doing tours 30 years later, right? At 50 years old. So where I come from, you had to have pen game. You know what I'm saying? Your pen game had to be, and that's the era we came from, you know, and it's like, but what you said was those are great words, man. I appreciate that. You know, as an artist, that means more than anything. You know what I mean? But I know how it feels when you also look up to an artist. You know, I looked up to Nas. To me, Nas was, and for me, there was no MC that could be Nas. I know there was Rakim and all that, but those were the OGs. From my era, from like, you know, being 18, 19, 20, like that era, 21, Nas was Nas. I was always Nas over Jay-Z. That was me. I was always Nas over Hov. That was just who I was. So when I got the chance to meet Nas, I'm a soulful person. You know what I mean? Like I'm not a, like, listen, if I love you, I love you. If I wear it right here, I'm 0 or 100. I don't have a middle. So when I met Nas and I was like, yo, you know, and he was like, Genovese, yo. And he just brought me in the studio and we talked for like hours. And it was like, yo, there's nothing better than that. Like when you love an artist and all of a sudden that artist somehow loves you. I mean, listen, so I know because if Nas, if I would have got a bad vibe from Nas when I first met him, not saying I still wouldn't have loved his music, but it would have been a different love. You get what I'm saying? So when you talk that, I know how that is on the other side. So I appreciate
man. You know what's crazy is that I bet that Nas is such a hip hop head that he knew exactly who you was, man.
Oh yeah. Well, listen, he knew the song. He told me, yo, you guys were like the Yonkers Wu-Tang. You know, he's like, yo, us in Queens were like, you know, and I've told this story before, but it was like, it was a mutual respect. And listen, I was nowhere on a level of Nas. You know what I'm saying? I was just a young kid on mixtapes, but he appreciated my music. And he not only took the time to talk to me, he ended up trying to get me a deal, and we became, you know, we interacted for, you know, basically up until the time his mom passed away. And then, you know, I lost track to him, but I saw him years later in LA, and he was always golden. But like, listen, he did more for me than people I knew my whole life. You know, and that's but that's life in general. A lot of times people that will help you are people that you don't even know. And it's just the way it is. It's nothing personal. It's just that there's people out there, you know, and thankfully for the internet, you know, you get to meet people like you, and there's people all over the world that message me in Germany, from France, from Italy, from fucking countries I don't even know where they're from, and they know me, you know, after all these years. So, you know, that always becomes a beautiful thing.
Yes, man. And what you just said, I would like to add on to it. You're doing the same thing for me right now. You could have been anywhere. Like Hov said, you could have been anywhere in the world, but you here. And again, I thank you so much. I'm the same as you, man. I'm all about love, man. If I got love for you, I'm gonna show it. You know what I'm saying? I don't need the bravado or anything like that. I want to ask you so many questions. I know I don't have you here for a long time. And again, thank you so much for doing this. You know, I'm gonna just add on this, what you said. Back in the day, in the golden era, for all you young cats out there, there was no difference between a battle rapper and a regular rapper. If you was a rapper, you better be ready to come with your best 16 at any time, bro. You know what I'm saying? You go to somebody's hood, you better be ready, bro. So Genovese, you've had an incredible journey, because I know your catalog. I'm a huge fan. But from your own words, can you please tell us, where are you from? What was your childhood like? What were some of your heroes? Who made the person that you are today, man?
Well, I mean, people, one thing about my music is my whole life is kind of in my music. And that's just, you know, that's just who I am. I wasn't the person to talk about, obviously in hip hop, we talk about, you know, other stuff and from a third person or seeing what your friends went through. But a lot of my music was about me and how I grew up, and I didn't grow up like a normal kid. My family, my father's side of the family, multimillionaires. My mom's side are hardworking people from the Bronx, and when my mom and dad met, I lived a whole different life till I was 5 years old, and my mom and dad split up. My dad he got caught up into the life in the 80s. You know what I'm saying? Drugs, drinking, the whole thing. And my mom raised me as a single mom in Yonkers because she moved from Long Island to Yonkers because she wanted to be close to her parents, and she didn't want me raised in that environment. So she sacrificed basically everything to keep me away from the bullshit, right? So I grew up, I know I had the name Genovese, but I didn't grow up as a Genovese, so to say. I grew up, we lived in a basement apartment, and my mom worked, and my nana and papa took care of me. And I think the reason I have an old soul is because of growing up with your grandparents, right? Like you have different values and stuff. They were immigrants. They were Italian immigrants that came here in the 30s. So, my mom's side of the family hasn't even been in America for 100 years.
Wow.
You know what I'm saying? Like it's, so we grew up different, but then growing up and just living a life of struggle. Obviously it was, I might have had more than most kids, but there was other kids I grew up with that had families and they had houses and they had pools, and you were like, all right, well, mom doesn't even have a car. We're on the bus. It was a different life, but it taught you to survive, and it taught you to create your own lane and your own shit because nobody was doing anything. There was no college plan for me. It was like, I'm going to graduate high school. Am I going to get caught in the streets, or am I going to make it in music? And my mom was behind me from, my mom passed away 4 years ago. My mom was my best friend, and anybody that knows me knows that. And my mom never told me to get a job. My mom said, you love music, go for it. You're great at anything you're going to do, go do it. She bought me a 4-track machine so I could record in the house. She bought me a microphone. She did everything to where like, hey, you want to stay out of the streets? Good. I'd rather you be in the room doing music than out here doing something crazy. So my mom was my biggest supporter. Wow. I said in a song, my mom was my worst critic, but my biggest fan. So you could understand how deep that was. Where like she would tell me in a minute, like, what the fuck you doing? That my mom had a mouth like that. But on the other hand, like, yo, that's the best shit. No one can fuck with my son. You know what I mean? So it's like, but having someone like that, which wasn't just like your mom, who was like a close friend, like your boy, that's how I grew up. So, but yeah, when you asked about who'd you look up to, my mother and my uncle, because my mother's brother, my Uncle G, when my dad wasn't around, he treated me like a son, and if it wasn't for him, I don't know what I would have did, because I didn't have a father figure around. So those two people molded me. And then, as I got, into music, it was really, but I did everything myself. You know what I'm saying? Like I didn't do no one did anything for me from the start. Listen, being around the Locks and being friends with Styles obviously was a benefit because they were blowing up as I was blowing up, So it was like, yo, we're going this way together. So, I mean, that was a beautiful thing. Would have I got on mixtapes if it wasn't for them? I don't know. But being involved in that crew, just like, Ghostface with the Woo, Ray with the Woo, like once they formed that, and once me and Casino, joined forces with the Locks, and, you have Richie Thumbs and Mo Money from Harlem. And we were just this group of like people, just like you said, like, who the fuck are these kids? Like, where are these kids? Because these kids are from Yonkers. You know what I'm saying? So Yonkers is, it's an incredible place, incredible talent. We got our own slang.
Yonkers is different. Yonkers is different. I grew up in Queens, man.
When I came up, it was all Mount Vernon. Like Westchester was like Heavy D, Pete Rock and CL. New Rochelle had Brand Nubians. So, Yonkers was like, we never got shot out until Mary came. But Mary wasn't really like, she was a singer. She wasn't repping Yonkers. But when X came, you know what I'm saying? The Locks came and X came, and then we were all. It was Yonkers was
on the map. Yeah. On the map. That just shows. You mentioning the heroes that you had and have just shows a lot to the human being that you are, because you could have called out anybody. So I just want to say shout out and thank you to your grandparents, to your mother, and I'm sorry for your loss. I don't want to skip this part because I didn't know this about you. are you telling us that you are related to the actual Genovese family, one of the five families, man?
No, I'm not saying that. But in New York City, there was a Genovese drugstore.
Oh.
And my great grandfather started that store in the 1920s. And through the years, it grew into one of the biggest drugstores in the tri-state. And everybody in the area, New York City and New Jersey knew Genovese drugstores. And that was my great grandfather.
Wow.
They were
Okay.
trading on the stock exchange in the early 90s. I mean, they were multi-million dollar. So growing up, it was tough for me because I didn't live, even though I had the name, I didn't live the life. So it
Mm,
was like I always said I lived like a two-sided life, where, you might have got Christmas gifts, you might have seen how your other side lives, but you're home and you open the fridge, there might, just be iced tea in there because my mom was trying her best. But that, listen, a lot of people stay in the same neighborhood and the same shit as their
yes.
parents because they never get out.
Mm-hmm.
You understand what I'm saying? I was able to see the other side, right?
Mm-hmm.
So my vision was always like, I don't want to be like this. I want to be like that. You get
Wow.
what I'm saying? So even though that I didn't grow up that way, in my mind was always that way. Because I'm like, if they, that's my blood. Like, so I have to figure my way to get there. So as much as it was hard to deal with, it was also like a push for me to get to the next level.
Mhm. Wow. How did you get introduced to hip hop, man? What do you have a story behind that? What is that like, man?
Well, thankfully, my mom was a music lover, and I used to wake up all the time. My mom, Saturday morning, my mom always had music on in general, and 80s music, Beatles, Fleetwood Mac, whatever Sinatra with my grand. So we always had that music. Billy Joel, who's one of my favorite artists in the world, but I grew up on that. And my mom, in the early 80s, when I started to enjoy hip hop, and I used to break dance a little bit with my man Hooks.
Mhm.
Um, we used to, 10 years old, listen, I grew up in a neighborhood that was Italian, Irish, and Polish. There was no black or Spanish kids.
Okay.
It was the 80s. You know what I'm saying? So it was just, that's the way the neighborhoods were. But I always loved hip hop. I just loved the sound, the breakdancing, the graffiti, the culture. So my mom bought me my first record, and this was probably early. It was like an LL or Run DMC, one of those early albums. And
Mhm.
I just was like, I was hooked. I was like, yo, like I said, the style, everything. But in terms of being an artist, I mean, I would have to say it was in high school,
Mm.
where I was like, because I used to write a lot, and my mom wrote a lot. And as I got older, I found when my mom passed, my dad was a poet. And he
Oh
wrote my
wow.
mom like notebooks of love letters or different things. So it was in my blood, but I didn't know it.
Mm.
So when I got in high school, me and my boy Tom, we started a little group with my boy Jay Blen, and he was a producer. Jay Blen, he passed away as well. He
Sorry.
did my life, and he did a lot of great joints. He was the first dude who brought me. He was the first guy who like said, "Hey, let's do a demo on you. Let's go to
Wow.
a real studio and do a demo." That was Jay Blen. If it wasn't for Jay Blen, I have to be honest, on the music side, I don't know if I would have got to the next level, for the
Wow.
fact that I didn't take it as serious. I didn't take it serious enough. High school, we were messing around, like I said, in my room, but I didn't take it serious enough until he was like, listen, you're too nice to just like not do anything.
Let it go. Yeah.
Yeah, like I'll even pay half. Let's just go. We'll go half. We'll pay. Back then, everybody didn't have a studio in the house. Like, you
Mhm.
typically go to Manhattan, pay a lot of money to record music, to get them on
Yes.
these big ass 8-at tapes. We had a duffel bag of shit. It was a different time
Mhm.
where now you could just sit in a room and record something and put it out in 5 minutes. This was recording a demo. Like, and
Yeah.
you were lucky enough to get in a studio. And from then on, it was like, that's when people start, local people started hearing and were like, yo, and once
Right.
people start bigging you up, and you get that confidence in,
Mhm.
and then, as that went on, I'm friends with Styles and we hung out in the street. And on Fridays, they used to have like everybody from different blocks would come to our block and chill out, drink 40s, and smoke blunts and shit like that. So Fridays was like the music night. So all the rappers would come and we would just be rapping to freestyles and beats and for like hours.
Ciphers.
Kiss would be rapping Styles, me, Thumbs, Casino.
Wow.
And we all Chic, all on the street, just like nothing to do with like a studio. We were just out chilling. And when people started hearing me, like they were like bugging, like, because like you said earlier, it wasn't white, black. When I rap, it was like, this kid is nice.
Yeah.
No one looked at me like, yo, he's a nice white rapper. That shit
Never.
happened when the media did it with Eminem. Because before that, nobody pushed that. They just said you're nice. Anybody I ever met in the game was never like, DC's a white rapper. It was just like, I was never categorized that until the Source magazine, which is on my wall, that they made Caucasian invasion and all that shit. That's the media. And you know,
I remember that article, by the way. Sorry for interrupting you. I remember that article.
Yeah, I was mad about that because I did an interview and it wasn't about, you know, white rappers, but then they put me in and that's just what the media, listen, and I get it. You know, even now, 20 something years later, the media does the same shit. They create whatever they want to create and they put it out. But yeah, I don't ever look at myself as a white rapper. I just look at myself, I'm nice. I'm nice regardless of anything. You know what I'm saying? Like I don't need a category for my career, you know?
So how did you meet, and thank you for sharing that. How did you meet the Locks? Do you remember the first day? And like, was it like, you know, y'all hit it off right away and you were part of the clique right away? Like, how did that happen, man?
Well, Styles I met in junior high school. And he wasn't rapping and I wasn't rapping. So later on, years later, they all went to a high school called Gorton High School that was in North Yonkers, and Styles went there. Jadakiss, Chic, they all went to Gorton High. I used to go after school to that school to look at the girls and shit like that, and just to chill. So like, you know, I ran into Styles and oh, yo, what up, dog? Yo, I haven't seen you in years, whatever. And I saw him running with all those kids now. So then I used to chill on a block called Chestnut. And back then I had like, you know, it was like a mix of everybody. It was Jamaicans, Puerto Ricans, Dominicans, you know, it was just all of us there. I was really the only like white Italian kid that used to hang there. And then Styles would be there too, because he had his own friends of friends. You know what I'm saying? So like I said, we all mingled together and me and Styles became kind of close because he heard me rapping and he was coming up.
Wow.
And then what really made it like, because we got an apartment together, and this was like on the verge of like when Styles was about to get Bad Boy and blowing up. Yeah. So all of us in that apartment, Jadakiss lived down the street. It just became like, you got to remember, this is a time when these kids were taking off, the mixtapes were taking off. You're living with an MC. Styles would wake me up and tell me his verses, and I would. Theses came in that apartment. Theses was like born in that apartment, and like, so you have to understand the time when you have MCs like that in an area, in an apartment, drinking, chilling. You could imagine what was coming out and how, you know, and you could ask you could ask any of them. Well, I know you could ask Styles and he'll tell you that like that time of life, the bars were like extreme level just because how hungry you were and no one had anything. We were just like, yo, if it ain't music, what are we going to do? It was that type of life. So I would say that's once we lived together and, you know, once they got signed and I was in the studio with them almost every night in Bad Boy when they were recording their first album, meeting Biggie, and you know that was the takeoff right there. So that's kind of in a quick form. That's kind of how it all came about.
Yo, to me, like, again, as a fan, that just sounded so crazy. Genovese and Styles and everybody's in the apartment together. Yo, my brain can't handle this right now.
Oh, Mace would pop up. Foxy Brown came through. Like this is all in the dirty apartment. We're just all in there. Just like half of the kids is hustling, half of the kids are in music. You know, we were just young and just trying to find life and trying to really get out of this shit. And but what came out of that apartment, like I could tell you, verses, theses, you know, niggas done started something. All those verses came out of that apartment, you know, and like I can't even explain. Like I wish I had a camera. Like I wish back then was now where everybody had a phone, because I don't even have really pictures from that time. But to be able to tell the story about it is still pretty cool.
I have to say this again. You have an incredible catalog, and people that are really, about hip hop and about you, they know this. You kind of touched on it for a little bit. Can you maybe go a little deeper into how the thesis was born?